Yeah, so let's take you live to New York to hear South Africa's view on what is happening.
Political solution. South Africa is of the view that this armed conflict, like all others, will result in unnecessary human suffering and destruction with global ramifications. In situations of conflict, the most vulnerable tend to suffer the most during and post the conflict. It is regrettable that at the time when the world is struggling to emerge from the effects of COVID-19 pandemic, we are seized with a conflict that will further delay the world's recovery. The UN Secretary General Guterres reminded us of this when he stated that the conflict will have a huge impact on the global economy in a moment when we are emerging from the COVID-19 pandemic, and so many developing countries need to have the space for recovery. The UN was founded after the horrors of the Second World War, with the aim of saving succeeding generations from the scourge of war. It is for this reason that the Charter of the United Nations enjoins all member states to settle their disputes by peaceful means in such a manner that international peace, security, and justice are not endangered. Mr. President, we stress that peace is best built through diplomacy and dialogue within the framework of the institutions of global dialogue, especially the United Nations. It is important for all nations to respect and uphold the principles of international law, including international humanitarian law and the provisions of the UN Charter. The UN is now in its 76th year of existence, and the events of the last 2 weeks have again reminded us of the urgent need to reform the UN, especially the UN Security Council, which is long overdue. We need a council free from the legacy of the Cold War, so that it can genuinely be the space where the community of nations come together to resolve conflict and build a more just and peaceful world. Mr. President, South Africa always appreciates the value that dialogue has in averting a crisis and de-escalating conflict. This is in line with our strong commitment to the peaceful resolution of conflict. In this regard, we also urge the Security Council to utilize existing tools at its disposal in support of the Pacific settlements of disputes. We also believe that the good offices of the UN Secretary General could make a positive contribution in finding a lasting solution to this conflict and should be utilized. We urge all parties to approach the situation in a spirit of compromise, with all sides upholding human rights, abiding by their obligations under the international law and international humanitarian law. A diplomatic solution to the problem should address the security concerns of the parties. South Africa continues to support and encourage regional initiatives such as the Minsk agreements, and we welcome the work of the Normandy format, the Trilateral Contact Group, and the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. Mr. President, this meeting is being held under the Uniting for Peace formula, which requires the General Assembly to meet if and when the Security Council is unable to act. However, it remains necessary for the Security Council to exercise its responsibility fully in the current situation. The situation in Ukraine should not be allowed, Mr. President, to affect negatively other priorities of the international community and the rest of the work of the United Nations. We therefore note with concern that not all situations of conflict have received the same attention. Indeed, while there is this focus on Ukraine, long-standing situations that the Security Council is seized with continue without resolution. It is necessary that we devote equal attention to other long-standing conflicts where the UN Charter and the human rights are being violated. In conclusion, South Africa endorses the statement issued by the African Union Commission expressing concern that the treatment given to African nationals and people of African descent at the borders of Ukraine, some of whom are not allowed to cross and move to safety. We urge European countries to take steps to resolve this situation, as all people have a right to cross international borders during times of conflict. I thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of South Africa.
And that is, of course, South Africa's ambassador to the UN there, Mathu Joyini, talking about the conflict, Francis, and saying that it continues to have an impact, particularly it needs to be prevented from having an impact on developing countries. But one of the things that she mentioned, which is quite critical, she says, events of the last 2 weeks have once again reminded us of a need to reform the Security Council, talking about how this is a body that needs to rid itself of some historical past in order to be able to address effectively some of the challenges that are faced with the world.
And of course, sometimes there's rotational members, and South Africa has been there, but African voices are non-existent ultimately in the Security Council, where you have 5 powerful nations with veto rights. A very middle of the road stance. What she was saying could be referring to Ukraine or Russia, saying that international law should be respected, maybe a reference to Russia there, but a diplomatic solution should address the security concerns of both sides. So maybe a reference to Russia there, being very neutral, saying, emphasizing diplomacy.
And one of the things also, Francis, is exactly what you talk about. She says a diplomatic solution is going to be one that is needed right now in order to prevent the situation from, further escalating. And she says that they must address all the security concerns of both parties. So seemingly saying that, again, the dialogue that the statement and the posture by South Africa has been taken. And of course, she is South Africa's permanent representative. I mean, talking about how for her, it's going to be important that there's a lasting solution, because while the focus is on Ukraine, there's various other issues that the Security Council is still seized with that also still need solutions. And she says it's going to be important.
All right, so South Africa's response, given the internal contradictions, the debate was interesting. That was our ambassador to the UN, Mathu Joyini.